A lot to get to with FT senior insider Ken Rosenthal covering the series for Fox ALCS Game 3 coming up. So, Ken, what's going on with Max Scherzer? What should we expect from him? Because it sounds like he doesn't even completely know what to expect until he's out there. And I know he's an adrenaline junkie, so it's probably going to be better than he thinks it is.
Well, the way he put it to me the other day was, all right, I threw 68 pitches in a simulated game. How does that translate to a postseason game? And he was asking the question because he didn't know the answer. Now, obviously, there is more adrenaline in a postseason game, but there's also greater strain on every pitch. So we really don't know what's going to happen tonight. And another interesting wrinkle here is that if you go back to 2019, Game 7 of the World Series, Scherzer pitched with those neck spasms that he had. He told me that when he did that, his arm was in great shape. It wasn't his arm. So this is different because his arm feels better, but it's not built up. So it's really difficult to know what's going to happen tonight. He's not going six, okay? But if they get three or four out of him, they have other length options on their roster, a number of them, from Dane Dunning and Andrew Heaney to Martin Perez and Cody Bradford. John Gray can give you an inning or two. They have guys to go to. It's just a question of how Max pitches effectively and how long he can go.
So, what about the health status of Yordan Alvarez? And technically, Ken, I kind of feel weird asking this because for performance purposes, doesn't clearly really matter. I mean, I know he didn't play well in game one, but it sounded like he was basically just as sick, if not sicker, for game two. And I don't know. I think most teams would take 2 home runs in that scenario.
He was at batting practice yesterday for their workout. He looked fine. He didn't look so fine before game two. So I would expect that he is going to be 100% good to go. And you're right, Scott. It's interesting. We've seen so often in athletics that guys who are less than 100% because of an illness or something like that can perform at a high level. Sometimes people say it sharpens their focus. I don't know if he needs sharpened focus. He's pretty locked in as it is, and he wasn't feeling well, but what he did was amazing. This guy is one of the great postseason performers of our time, and it just keeps getting better.
I know you were saying that Jordan was doing really good in your article. He had an awesome an awesome season. He's a great player. But the title of your article was "The Astros are fighting till the end." Are you insinuating that the end is near for the Astros in this series?
Well, they're down 2-0. I'm not saying that the series is over. Anyone who has followed the Astros over the years knows this team actually thrives in this situation. They love being with their backs against the wall. It suddenly galvanizes them in some fashion. So I don't expect that it's over, and I was not going to say it's over. But when you're down 2-0, yes, you are facing the possibility of going down 3-0. And if you're down 3-0, you're facing the likely end. So I know people get bent out of shape about headlines. I'm not talking about you, Eric. But to me, it seemed like a pretty reasonable headline. I don't write them per se, but I generally do take a look at them. I didn't have any problem with it. And the thing with the Astros is also, we need to recognize this. On the road, they are a different team than at home, and they have not been a good home team. They're below 500 at home for the year, including postseason. The record's 40 and 45. On the road, 50 and 31 during the regular season. And in Texas, at Globe Life Field, they are holy terrors. 6-1 with an average of 9 runs per game. Their OPS is like 1,036, which is Shohei Ohtani territory. That's the whole team playing like Shohei Ohtani at Globe Life Field. So I do expect them to be better tonight, and we'll see what Christian Javier has. But this is a fascinating game because obviously you go down 3-0. There's only been one team in history to come back from that in Major League Baseball.
A good call. And I mean, same story. It's do or die in game three for the Diamondbacks, essentially. And I don't think anybody is counting them in at this point after seeing those first two games. So, speaking of headlines, in fair territory, I saw Bryce Harper's name and heard Reggie Jackson, Babe Ruth, probably going to get some blowback from fans. How can you compare Harper to legends of our sport and all that? Harper is becoming, and not an instant legend. He's been around in the league for a while, but I mean, he is like on path if they win a World Series to be on that Mount Rushmore, or a top icons in Philadelphia sports figure history.
Scott, when I was on my private jet flying from Houston to Dallas the other night, the one that AJ arranged for me, I had some time to look up some things. And I wanted to see how Harper does compare to guys like Babe Ruth and Reggie Jackson. I picked those two. Those are two of the October legends that we often refer to. And the numbers weren't exactly the same, but they certainly were comparable. You can have a conversation. Now, Babe Ruth, of course, only played in World Series. Reggie played in a lot more postseason games than either of those two guys. But if I'm not mistaken, Bryce has 15 home runs in the postseason. Reggie had 18 and Babe had 15. Now, granted, the games played were different and circumstances were different, but it's a conversation. And if you go to Fair Territory and you watch it or you listen to it, I go into greater detail about this. And the point I was trying to make is not that Bryce Harper is Reggie Jackson in October or Babe Ruth in October, but he is doing things that make you think, wow, how does he compare? And when you do the comparison, it's not as far off as you might think.
Ken, first of all, you came on here the other day and said, "Oh, I'm going to post my little picture of me on the bus." I haven't seen a picture of you on the
Oh,
bus.
you're right.
little
I didn't
fella.
do that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't do that. AJ, the bus was not a well received hit. I'll just put it that way.
Oh.
Oh, so you don't like that? We always knew you didn't like bus rides.
No,
We always
it wasn't.
You got off. Let me guess. You got off the bus and you made him get you a helicopter or a plane, didn't you?
I didn't do that, but the bus had some shock absorber issues. Let's put it that way. It wasn't a full bus.
That's
It was
called
one
the
of
minor
those.
leagues.
It wasn't a minor league type bus. It wasn't a school bus, but it wasn't a great coach either. It was one of those smaller things. And let's just say it was a bumpy ride. And I didn't take the picture, you're right, because I was writing and I forgot all about it. I
Party bus.
apologize.
Party
On the way
bus.
on the way back, you can take a picture.
All right, maybe I'll take a plane.
Oh, there it is. See,
Yep.
Grunty? What we always knew it. We
Did
always
it have
knew
a pole in the middle of it? I want to figure out what kind of bus this was.
I can't describe it. You know those vans people rent out when they have weddings and they
Yeah, like a
transport
Sprinter.
people to different places? Yeah, it was kind of like that.
Oh,
Okay.
wow. Ken didn't have his own row of seats. That's why he wasn't comfortable. It's fine. We get it. Ken, before we get to Kim Ing, why does nobody want the Red Sox job? Why can't they having such a hard time finding someone to take this job? It seems like a pretty good job. They're going to spend money. They have the fan base. They have Fenway Park. But why do they have such a hard time filling this job?
AJ, I wouldn't say that nobody wants it. Different people have different circumstances, and in the case of James Click and John Daniels, apparently they did not want to go and interview for family reasons. They just did not want to relocate, whatever the case might be. So, yes, it's an attractive job in many ways. However, every executive out there is aware that the Red Sox run through GMs like nothing else. They've had three in the last, I think, 12 years or 14 years, and two of them won World Series. And yet they were gone pretty soon after that. The other one was Chaim Bloom. He went to the ALCS in 2021, didn't last 2 years after that. So that's one thing. The other thing is you take the Red Sox job, you're inheriting a manager, Alex Cora, who clearly has power in the organization, who has actually spoken of having aspirations of becoming a GM, though not at this particular time. That's one thing. You're also inheriting some people in the front office who have been there quite a while. High level people, assistant GMs, all well thought of, but they're not your own if you're coming in as the new president of baseball operations. And I'm not saying it was a problem for Chaim Bloom, but when you take one of these jobs, you want some control over who you have on your staff. And with the Red Sox, you're kind of having to accept a number of different people. So it's all those things combined. The trepidation that would seem to me to be the most valid would be the way they run through people. And that's obvious. It's on the record. It's clearly apparent to everyone in the game. That ownership is fickle. They are reactionary to what's going on with the public. If the fans get uneasy, the ownership reacts, and it's not necessarily a healthy place for a president of baseball operations to be in.
I have a lot of thoughts here, and it turns into questions. So, one, I'm thinking actually about recent past with the Mets. The Mets were having trouble initially figuring out their front office situation, and it ended up turning into Billy Epler, which now I think they've got their guy that they had their eye on for a long time. So, I'm thinking that if the Red Sox want someone that's already got experience in a pedigree, they're probably going to have to overpay because you have to assume you might not make it through the contract or something like that, right? Or they're, like you might not have a job in that position for a couple of years. The main thing I wanted to ask you about that stood out to me, Alex Cora. We speak a lot about how the manager role has changed nowadays. I just find it fascinating, yes, that a team's going to keep a lot of their front office intact, and that already would piss someone off if they're coming in that they don't have say. But then the manager, almost every manager in baseball, correct me if I'm wrong, has definitely less say, less power, and has to really work hand in hand with the president of baseball ops or GM, whatever it is. So doesn't this almost seem old school where it's like, well, you have to deal with our manager, okay? He might call some shots that you don't want to call. That's not how this works anymore, does it?
In most cases, no. And Alex Cora is an accomplished manager. He's won a World Series and he's done some really good things. They've had some down years too, but I don't know that we can blame him for those down years. It is an unusual situation, Scott, the way you described it in today's environment. Does that mean that a president of baseball operations wouldn't want Alex Cora as his manager? No, it doesn't mean that. And this would not be the first head of baseball operations to inherit a manager. Happens all the time. But at the same time, it might give someone pause. It might. And I don't know how people approach these things. I'm not someone who's ever been in that position, nor do I aspire to be in that position. But if I were going in, I'd say, hey, where are we with Alex? Do I have to keep Alex for the duration of his contract? Can we maybe do some things differently? Can I have more say than perhaps Chaim Bloom had, although Chaim Bloom's had plenty of say? However the dynamic works and however you want it to work, you need to express that if you're incoming. And that is something that is going to have to be addressed, I'm sure, in all of the interviews. It's not that Alex Cora is a negative. It would be difficult for anyone to say that, but it's an interesting way that they have gone about it and an interesting dynamic, as I said, for a new president of baseball operations to deal with.
So how do we deal with to me, what would be the most coveted GM now with Kim Ng and the situation that is slowly unfolding day by day down in Miami?
Oh, it's not slowly unfolding, Eric. It unfolded real quick.
Okay,
and
flapped
very
out
surprising.
there.
No, I know what you're saying, though. And
Yeah.
it's an unusual deal there. And let's just look at this from the ownership perspective. The last two times this team made the playoffs. 2020, after the shortened season, they make the playoffs. President of Baseball Operations, Michael Hill, is gone. 2023, they make the playoffs in a full season for the first time since winning the World Series in 2003. General Manager Kim Ng is gone. I think that tells you all you need to know. Now, clearly she wanted certain things done differently, and as a person in her position, she has that right to express it, particularly when she has had success. She also seemingly wanted an extension rather than the club just picking up her option. Yes, she has that right to ask for that when she has had success. And then when you tell her, Kim, nice job, but we're going to bring in a president of baseball operations over you, so you'll effectively be the number two. I mean, you're hearing all you need to know if you're Kim Ng. So this speaks to the Marlins. It speaks to their ownership. It speaks to me, a lack of vision. And also, one other thing I want to point out here. The Marlins didn't mind all the positive press when they hired Kim Ng. Oh, wow, what a progressive organization. How cool is it that the Marlins are hiring the first female general manager in Major League history? Well, that's fine, and they deserved it at the time. But hey, they deserve every bit of backlash they're getting for mistreating this person who is accomplished, who has done good things for the organization, who is well liked in their organization. It wasn't like she was a tyrant and people, oh, we can't stand Kim. No, she was highly respected. I don't know what they're doing.
Ken, why? I feel like I know Brittany Giroli wrote the article about Kim Ng and what it means for the game and all that stuff. But I feel like this hasn't been as big of a story as it should be. I think it's gotten kind of almost squashed a little bit. Maybe it's because of the playoffs. Maybe it's because of the time of the year. But other than on this show, I haven't heard a whole lot of people talking about this other than some random tweets here and there, an article in The Athletic by Britt Giroli. But it's been kind of squashed. Is that Major League Baseball doing that?
No, Major League Baseball does not control the entire media. They control some of the media. But it just is probably a reflection of the Marlins and their place in the baseball ecosystem, which is not very big. But I agree with you, AJ. This should be getting more attention. And the one thing I'll say about our place, the Athletic, we have the resources, the people to cover everything. And we do cover everything, or at least we try to cover everything. And Britt is one of our best writers, and she felt strongly about this and wrote, one, a great news story on it, and then two, a great column saying, hey, good for Kim Eng, basically. She did what she had to do. She wasn't going to take this BS, for lack of a better term. So I agree with you, AJ. This does need more attention. I will only say that a lot of outlets don't want to get dirty. Put it that way. I don't think they're controlled by MLB necessarily. They're not. But they don't have maybe the resources to do it and maybe the desire to do it. And that's on them.
Do we know what the situation is for the Marlins now going forward? Because we just covered how the Red Sox job isn't coveted. Holy shit. Hey, you're going to have limited resources in a market that does not do well in attendance. We don't have a winning track record. Oh, and if you make the playoffs, you're likely gone. We don't like that.
Scott, I don't know. And you're right. It's a job that has less appeal in many ways than the Red Sox job. At the same time, it's one of 30. And I know I repeat myself when I say this, which I always say when a bad managerial job comes open or a bad GM job comes open, people will take the job because it's one of 30. It's a chance to make your mark. And in Kim's case, all right, she gets let go or she has a parting of ways, whatever you want to call it. But at the same time, she's an attractive candidate. She's done the job now. People know that she can do it. Not that there was much doubt before. It's a clear track record. Someone will take the job. They'll get someone. Maybe they have someone internal in mind, though I don't know that they do. It will be filled. But again, it comes with a caveat. Just like the Red Sox job, it comes with a caveat. The caveat is no guarantees here.
But weren't they bringing somebody in to be her boss essentially after she did a great job? Couldn't that person take her job? Or is that person that they were going to bring in be like that job would be beneath them?
Eric, I don't know that they've identified that person yet. Now, their intent
they're
was,
just saying they would bring somebody.
yes, their intent was to bring in a president of baseball operations over. Now, certainly, if they had that person in place, yeah, you could do it that way. And who knows? Maybe there's somebody they have in mind and it's somebody really attractive. I don't know. But that's not the idea here. The idea was to keep Kim Eng for one more year under a new president of baseball operations. No guarantee beyond 2024. And she just said, no, I'm not doing that.
You know, this is more of a point, Ken, but it just speaks to how an organization will just veer towards whatever storyline they want to be out there. There are very few teams that cry poor as much as the Marlins over the last couple decades. And I actually believe some of it. You know, I've been privy to some information behind the scenes on how their books look at times, okay? Not as shiny as some other teams. So you have an executive that leads you to the postseason, and then you want to hire someone above her. Those positions cost money. Those positions nowadays, president of baseball ops, it's 7 figures. There's not president of baseball operations people in my mind. I'm a little bit guessing, but pretty educated, that are making a few $100,000. These are multi-million-dollar jobs potentially, even for a team that's trying to be cheaper. So we're gonna cry poor and then try and replace someone. It boggles my mind how the narrative can just shift to however they want it to shift. And ultimately, it comes down to like, hey, owners got some friends that say you like analytics now, and you don't want some of those people to kind of be taken out of their jobs, so you don't agree with this person. So do whatever you want and hire someone above her. It's ridiculous.
Well, we're talking about the Miami Marlins, a team with a history of odd behavior, even under the previous ownership. I'm not sure exactly how to respond, Scott. I agree with you. You can't cry poor on one hand and then have to hire or want to hire a president of baseball operations over your GM on the other hand. I don't know that they are poor. No, wait a second. I know they're not poor. No Major League Baseball team is poor. It's just a matter of how they want to spend their money. And they get money in revenue sharing. They get all kinds of money from the central fund and all of that. They have the money to hire a president of baseball operations and a GM. They have the money to have a better payroll than they do, I would imagine. There have been financial questions with Bruce Sherman, the owner. There's no question about that. But this is not a situation where, oh my gosh, they can't have a bigger front office. They could if they chose to. Now, that apparently was one of the issues here, that actually Kim Ing wanted to get rid of some people and maybe they wanted to keep them. Again, we don't have all of the information here. We don't know exactly where Bruce Sherman's coming from. But why would you want to hire a president of baseball operations in the first place over Kim Ing? You have on the business side someone running that. She's running the baseball side. I don't understand the logic of that. And I have not talked to Bruce Sherman, admittedly, about this. I've not asked him. I don't know that he would take my call, but that's a question that I surely would like to hear the answer to.
Ken, my question is, Wayne Huizinga, when he owned the Marlins, right? He took a lot of heat after 97 and they got rid of the team. Okay, Jeffrey Loria, 2003, they win the World Series. He gets rid of the team. He took heat for 10 plus years for it, right? Bruce Sherman, he's not taking anything for this, I don't feel like. It's kind of the same thing. Like, shouldn't he be having to answer questions about what they're doing, and shouldn't he be taking more heat? I mean, we give the A's owner all the time grief for the way he's running things. Shouldn't the Marlins owner, Sherman, have to stand up there, answer questions, and say why Kim Ing left and why he didn't want her back and why he's doing all these things?
AJ, great point, and it goes back to your previous question. Why isn't this getting more attention? Should it be getting more attention? I believe it should. Now, there are very few owners who get in front of microphones and explain what their thinking is. They release statements, you don't much see them, right? I can think of maybe a few that will speak, but there aren't many. Atanasio with the Brewers occasionally will do something publicly, but for the most part, and I'm sure there are others, for the most part, you don't see these guys. Jim Crane with the Astros is visible. He will speak at times, but it's just not done. And that's the way the teams are run. It's like these guys have their individual fiefdoms and they can do whatever they want. And often they're not held accountable. They're not held accountable by the league either. The league basically takes a laissez-faire approach with the clubs, letting the clubs run themselves as they should. But sometimes you wonder if that's the best thing. If you wonder, like, for instance, with the A's, should the league have stepped in? People have asked that question, and they didn't. Well, that's the way the sport is run. I don't know that I have a good answer for why it's run that way, but that's just kind of where we are.
Okay, so what's better for the sport? NFL, you have like Jerry Jones. NBA, you have Mark Cuban and all these guys out there doing all these things, right? NFL, you see the owners, you see them out there doing it. In MLB, you never see it.
Steve Cohen.
Steve Cohen's the
Steve
only
Cohen,
one.
he's another one. No,
Okay.
there are a few. And AJ, I don't know the NFL or the NBA well enough to know how many of their owners are really out front guys. It's just not something that owners like to do. And I guess if I owned the team, I would do whatever the heck I wanted to. It's my right. I bought the team. But certainly in this case, I would like to hear an explanation for why this went down the way it did. Why Bruce Sherman would not extend Kim Ing. Why he would not give her a longer contract. Why he wanted a president of baseball operations over her. Why he would not allow her to do certain things with personnel that apparently she wanted to do. These are all fair questions. These are all questions that should be asked. But if the guy is not going to answer them, there's not a lot that can be done.
This is my thing, and because we went over this a lot yesterday too, that it's terrible optics for the league. It's a mark against the league. If you're an outsider to the sport and you see this storyline of the first female GM
Yes.
and then how this is handled, it's awful. There should be something written, because if they just say it won't happen. Something should be written in the next CBA. You own a team. You're the controller. You're the one that shows up at the meetings and makes the decisions. You have to speak to the media X amount of times. Period. Players.
Good luck with that, Scott.
I know that. I know that.
It will never happen.
Acuna got crushed the other day because he didn't speak after their playoff game.
No, you're right.
We have people making massive decisions for hundreds of people that really affect millions of people, and there's not a word. Then you shouldn't be allowed. I know. I'm just complaining, but it's absurd. And if we all care about our sport, it is hurting anyone involved with the sport to not have an explanation on a story like this, where we have to call it out and speculate.
That's very true. And all people ask in general is accountability. We ask that of the players. We ask that of the managers. We ask that of the GMs. We ask that of the media members, right? We want everyone to be accountable for what they do one way or the other. A number of owners, including Bruce Sherman in this case, to this point, are not accountable. And it can drive you a little nuts. And I hear what you're saying, Scott. I'm with you. Believe me, I'm with you. We want people talking. We want explanations because you know what? Often, and this goes back even to the conversation we were having last week about reporters in the clubhouse. Often, when you talk to somebody, you get a different perspective. You get their own perspective, and you understand a little bit, perhaps, or a little bit more, why they made the decision they did. When there is this vacuum, as there is right now, as you just said, Scott, all people can do is speculate and wonder what the heck was going on here, and that's not healthy. Now, I don't know how you solve this. I don't know that it is solvable, but the problem you guys are identifying is a legitimate problem, and it's something that, yes, should be discussed.
Yep, we're pissed off about it. I did some interviews for that are coming out over the next few days for some other publications, and made sure I mentioned it because someone's got to talk about it. So, thanks, Ken. We'll be back on with you tomorrow.
Good stuff, guys. Thanks.
Thank you. And you can catch Ken, of course, on ALCS Game 3 on Fox, and more of his thoughts on Fair Territory that just came out yesterday. Fresh topics, including the Rangers and Phillies spending well, Evan Carter, more on this Kim Ng conversation. And coming up next, the viral hit of the week is literally a hit in Philly.